Hello, everyone, and welcome to Freethought Blog's Conscience. This is FtBCon3. It is 9 p.m. Central, Saturday, January 24th, and we're about to host the Secular Asian Communities discussion on the racial binary in discussions of how did that go? I'm sorry.
In diversity discussions.
Diversity discussions, I'm sorry.
In the secular community.
I totally mangled that. My apologies. So I'm going to be handling the Q&A in the chat room, available at tinyurl.com/FtBcon. And I will let Lilandra and the panel of guests take it from here so I don't keep mangling it. Thanks.
Hello, this is the third Secular Asian Community panel on FtBCon, and I wanted to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. What we're going to do is we're going to give our name, our ethnic identity, and the secular projects that we're involved in, and I'm going to do mine first, and then I'll say the name so we can go left to right on my screen. My name is Lilandra. I'm biracial, Vietnamese, and I hate to say white, but I'm Amerasian. There's 2 or 3 terms for it. There's HAPI. There's in Hawaii. There's Eurasian, and it still confuses people regardless. But the secular projects I'm involved in, I make science education videos with R and Ra on YouTube for use by students and parents and people who want to bone up on their science. And I'm also a science curriculum instructor. I teach teachers how to use their science curriculum. Okay, so let's start with Cindy on the left.
Hi. Let me see here. Hi, I'm Cindy Cooper. I am biracial. I am half Thai, half Caucasian. I am the president of Camp Quest, Oklahoma.
Okay, and next, Marissa.
My name is Marissa Torres Langseth. I am from the Philippines, a pure Filipino. However, I have been a U.S. citizen since 1995. I am the founder of HAPI, H-A-P-I. You want to be happy? You join us. It's Humanist Alliance Philippines International. We just got our SEC registration a few days ago, so that is really a big thing for us.
Okay, cool. Michael? Are you muted, Michael?
Cannot hear him.
Uh-oh. I'll come back to you. Okay. Vic, introduce yourself.
All right. Yeah. Hey. My name is Vic Wang. I was born here in Texas. My parents came here from Taiwan, and originally they're Chinese ethnically, which makes me Chinese. I've been involved in the free thought movement formally since about 2011. As those who saw me last time, obviously my tagline was much longer back then. As far as my organizations that I was affiliated with, back then I was something of a jack of all trades and a master of none. So now I'm president. I just stepped in as president of Humanists of Houston, and that will be my main focus now. And so our organization, we are a chapter of the AHA, American Humanist Association. And we do a lot of events throughout the month. We actually had our main monthly gathering just this morning, where we had the executive director of the Spiritual Naturalist Society, Daniel Strain, giving a talk there. Last month we had R.N. Ra and Lilandra come as be our guest speakers. We also had Keith Parsons just before that, the atheist philosopher and author. Coming up, we got Zach Copeland for next month. Got Greta Christina next month too. Really excited about that. Seth Andrews coming back to Houston, all kinds of cool stuff going on. So yeah, just a little bit more about Humanists of Houston. We also have discussion forums throughout the month where we'll have presentations on different topics of a humanist nature, book or book reports type thing, and we'll have discussion. We've got a women's group. We've got a volunteerism program where we do at least one volunteer outing per month. This past month, we did the Houston Food Bank, and we're about to start up an Adopt a Highway program. So yeah, we've got a lot of cool stuff going on there.
Okay, thank you, Vic. Yao?
Yes, I'm Yao Man Chen. I am currently in California, Northern California. I am ethnically Chinese. I'm originally from Malaysia. I came to the U.S. in the 1970s and went to school, did my college education, undergraduate and graduate here. And for the last 30 years, I was working at University of California at Berkeley, and last year I retired. And so now I am a man of leisure. No, not really. But I am involved in mostly in the skeptical movement. I'm a member of the IIG here in Northern California. The IIG is the Independent Investigators Group, where we sort of investigate the paranormal, the pre-billion-dollar challenge from the James Randi organization. So, but I'm mostly involved with that. But I'm also quite active speaker for local libraries and community events in science and science education. And I take pleasure in needling the religious fundamentalists among the Chinese. And I was on Survivor, CBS Survivor.
Okay. Are you okay now, Mike?
I don't know. Can you hear me? No?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm Mike Nam. I'm the president of the Center for Inquiry in New York City. And I also sometimes volunteer with the Sunday Assembly here. My ethnic background is Korean, and that's pretty much about it.
Okay, before we started, I wanted to disambiguate the word Asian, because in the United States, when people say Asian, they're often referring to East Asian, such as Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese. And in the UK, they're often referring to South Asian, such as the Indians, Bangladesh. And so for this purposes of this panel, most of us, as you heard, are here in America. And we're either first-generation immigrants or we're second-generation born here. And 2 of us are biracial. So when we talk about Asian, that's a catch-all term, but you're talking about a very large swath of humanity there. So, but we're talking about secular Asians and Asians in the free thought community today. I'll start this off. I remember our first panel discussion on Asians in the free thought community. I don't know if we were the first one to ever broach that topic. I've never seen a panel, and I go to a lot of conventions in the U.S. and I'm going to be going to one in Australia and a few in the UK this year. And I go with my husband, and I've never seen that as a topic. And let me just put this out there, that the first thing that comes to mind is there aren't that many Asians in non-Asian countries. But in the United States, you're talking about millions of people, 19 million. So it's not as small as you think. In California, 6 million people. So there are people there, and there are other barriers to them joining in the U.S., like language barriers. Like Vic is an organizer in Houston, where there's also a large Asian population, and that's one of the barriers to encouraging more actual barriers to encouraging more Asian participation in free thought in the U.S. So when we say binary nature, what we mean is that we had to bring this up, and in non-Asian countries, Asians are often ignored, and their issues are often ignored. And so we kind of took the initiative here. And so that's what I just wanted to clear up before we start. And I want to talk about some successes since our first Free Thought blog con. I noticed that Yao, Yao, do you want me to call you Yao or?
It's actually Yao Man.
Yao Man, thank you. I don't want to offend you. I noticed that you spoke at the last American Atheist Convention. How did that go? About Asian issues and free thought.
Yeah, there wasn't. I don't think there was anything on the program for it, but the absence of Asians at the convention participants was, quite noticeable. I always keep pointing out, and that's the same as the skeptical movement, right? Because if you look at the population of the U.S., the two most secular groups of people are the Asians and the secular Jews. They happen to be the most successful also. But yet, when I go to skeptical movement conventions or meetings, there's definitely a lack of Asians participation. I look at the universities, every research universities I've worked in or have visited, you see a lot of Asian professors and researchers, and most of them are very secular, but yet we don't see them participating in any organized form in the humanist movement or the secular movements.
I think except the Philippines, we are the most religious in the Southeast Asian nation. You know that, right?
Yes, it is. Also, I read somewhere that as a population, they are the most gullible also. I don't know how to measure that.
We have reached like 104 million already, and of course 80 to 97% are religious, and of course very, very, very gullible, like what you said.
I think it's good to also bring up demographically, because so many of us come from different countries or of origin, how that breaks down. I mean, the Pew Research that was done on religion and Asian populations, when you break it down by the different ethnicities, it's very different. Chinese American immigrants, Korean American immigrants tend to be much more religious. There's probably a lot of different reasons for that. I can't go into all of them, but it's not. Even if you said that we're more secular in general, it really depends on the population we might be talking about specifically.
I think Japanese, they're the most secular as far as I know. But we don't have any Japanese here.
Not today. I visited Vic Wang's Humanist of Houston, and I noticed that he was having. I've been to his gatherings before, and at the talk he had more Asians than before, South Asians and East Asians. So that to me counts as a success. I think that there is the language barrier, but I think there are lots of, like Yao was saying, lots of English-speaking secular people that could be contributing to the free thought movement. That part of it, I think, is that we need to be encouraging more Asian faces and leaders in the free thought movement, so Asians see that Asians are welcome there. What do you think, Vic?
Yes, definitely. I mean, that's you talk about the disparity as far as how few Asians we see in the free thought movement in general. In fact, I remember that's how I first met Yao Man, was back at 2011's CSI-Con in New Orleans, when he came up to me and was actually remarking at how rare it is to see a fellow Asian at these types of events. And of course, yeah, the disparity, it seems to me, is even greater, as far as the speakers at these types of conventions, and the leadership in the free thought movement seems to be even, it's even more to see Asian representation there. So it's so great, obviously, to see some Yao Man giving a talk at the American Atheist Convention. And but yeah, last time we were here on this chat, 2 of these ago, I remarked at how the number of Asians in the especially East Asians that were here in the Houston free thought community despite the fact that, like as you mentioned, we have a very huge Asian population here. But yet, at that time, the involvement in the groups that the freethought groups was virtually non-existent. I mean, it was pretty much just me and maybe one, maybe two other people that I would ever see at any of the events. But yeah, you know, like you mentioned, when you all came out here, y'all noticed that we had vastly more. I think we had more actually just in that one talk one room. We had more East Asians than I've seen probably than I would seen in an entire year back 3 years ago.
Are you talking about the AA last April in Utah? Or
no, I'm talking actually just about when Aaron Ra and Lilandra came last month to give a talk here in Houston.
Oh.
And there was quite a few East Asians right there in the audience in that one room. Now, and I've noticed that as well in other meetups that we've had recently. There's been a good, 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 Asians at some of these gatherings, even in a group of 20 to 30 people. So it's a huge uptick we've seen now, and I have to make clear here that I certainly can't claim to take credit for that. I mean, I actually don't know what the reason for that is. Although I have spoken with some of them about that and asked them what it is that brought them out to decide to come out and be involved with the groups. And one of the recurring themes is just simply that it is much less taboo than it used to be an atheist. And to be involved with organizations like ours. Now, obviously, that's something which obviously that's something that affects everyone. The fact that being an atheist is vastly less taboo than it has been just within the last few years, and is continuing to be less and less taboo all the time. Obviously, that's going to get involvement from all different demographic groups to be more prevalent. Now, but I suspect that though it's a little different in the Asian community. I think the Asian community in general maybe has a little more avoidance of things that are considered taboo. Even though religion is not something, or atheism, I would say, is far less taboo in the Asian community, certainly than it is compared to in the Black community or in the Hispanic community. In those communities, it's incredibly taboo to be an out atheist. So I think that's certainly less of a phenomenon with us in that regard. But I do think, however, that there is just a tendency in general in the Asian community to want to avoid taboos overall, and the fact that it is becoming less and less taboo, I think, is certainly a big factor in that.
Didn't you tell me that one person said they were glad to see another Asian who came to your group? Told you that?
Well, yeah, certainly. Well, yeah, actually, that reminds me of, I mentioned how, years back, there was really only one other Asian who comes to mind, actually. East Asian, anyway, as ever really coming to our events. Well, I remember the very first time I met her, and the very first time, it was actually the first meetup she had been to. I think she had been to one, and then many years later decided to come once more. And when she saw me, we ended up chatting, and she was glad to see another Asian there. And she actually later did say that if I hadn't been there, there's a good chance she may never have come back again. That's actually a refrain I've heard from other people of minority groups as well, is the fact that when they go to an event, I mean, hey, I talked with, there was one member of her group who's Black, and he was telling me about the first time that he went to a meetup, and he actually was so apprehensive about going, being scary enough that he's, going for the first time, seeing a bunch of strangers, and he said that when he did see another person there who also was a Black atheist, that made him feel a lot less of an outsider, and he said later that, yeah, he probably would not have come back if he had come and he was the only Black person in the entire group. Just the fact that there was somebody else there who had a shared cultural background and kind of also could relate to where he was coming from as a Black atheist. And I think that's also true to some extent also with Asians.
Yeah, I think it's a piece of the puzzle. It is what you're saying. Perhaps there's the taboo aspect of challenging authority, and instead of keeping your head down and taking care of your family. But there's also that if they see more Asians, that they'll feel like Asians are welcome there. And so I think that if the free thought community wants to encourage more Asian participation, encourage Asian leaders, and I think it will follow. But let's go to Marissa.
Sorry. Oh, no, go ahead. I don't want to hog it. I did have some more to add there, but I can come back to that later.
No, add it. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah, I wanted to mention that. Yeah, when it comes to bringing in groups, people from other minority groups into your free thought communities, my suggestion, my advice is don't be afraid to hold events that are designated geared towards specific minority groups. I know there's some discussion, some controversy over that, and some people don't like the idea of having a Black atheist meetup or a Hispanic or Asian atheist meetup. As far as I'm talking specific events, not organizations. Of course, the controversy exists with organizations too, but here in Houston, we've done the different organizations that I've been a part of in the past. We've had Black atheist meetups. We just started doing Spanish-speaking atheist meetups with Humanists of Houston, and they have been very successful. I mean, and when I say successful, what I mean by that is we've had very good attendance. Virtually no no-shows as far as people who RSVP. Pretty much every single one shows up. We get a lot of first-timers who have never come out to actual events before, which is exactly the whole point, to encourage them to come out and make them comfortable being a first-timer and not being alone. It also draws out a lot of people who have been on the sidelines, maybe have been members for a long time but have not come out and been involved in a long time. And one of the things that we make very clear, we've always made very clear, is that if we have say a Black atheist meetup, it doesn't mean that only Black atheists are invited. It means that this is an event that is geared towards supporting. I'm getting an echo here. Are y'all?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I'll just go on. That's okay. All right, so what we emphasize is that these events are geared towards supporting members of this community, not just for them to come specifically, but also people who want to be there and offer their encouragement and let them know that, yeah, there are people who are willing to listen to their experience and give them a kind of encouragement, whatever, especially in communities such as the Black and Hispanic community, where it is especially taboo and especially difficult to be in that position. In that environment. Now, and actually, that's another way that it has been successful too. Typically, about 50% of the people that show up are actually not from that specific demographic, whether white or other minorities that come as well. And so it's always a very diverse ethnic makeup whenever we do these types, whenever these types of events have happened. And of course, there's always, like I said, there's always going to be one person, one guy who's going to chime in and object to having the idea of an ethnic-specific or, whatever, cultural-specific oriented meetup. Every time, like clockwork, it's always one guy, but that's why, I always actually have a response ready to go because I know it's going to happen. And basically kind of reiterating some of the things that I've said just now. And that always, diffuses it in my experience. But and I think one other concern too is that if you have a recurring meetup towards a specific minority group, there's always that concern that, okay, well, is it kind of just going to become its own thing where they're not going to come to your, where they'll just have that, go to that on that event only. And that hasn't really been that much of an issue in my experience, but I think one of the things that we've talked about to avoid that is just to make sure that, when we have these events, that we also make it an opportunity to talk about the other things that are happening in the organization and invite them and to really trying to bring them into the organization overall.
Okay. Thank you, Vic. Marissa, we're talking mainly about U.S. issues, but and you live in the U.S. too. But I would like you to talk with us about what free thought groups are like in Asian countries, like the Philippines.
Okay, well, I would say I am very successful because this is actually my second society. And we have over 5,000 members online. And maybe 200, 300 of that are, are serious and really activists. We have done a lot of activities. In fact, We some of my members went to Baguio for the LGBT parade, for the RH bill passage. We had debates. Recently, I have made a project about, we call it nutritional campaign. It's actually feeding some children, like 200 children, and following them up, because when you feed people in the, I think it's just a basic need in the Philippines to eat. I was just in Disneyland a few weeks ago, and I see these children, they're fighting about what doll to get. And in fact, I was able to talk to foundation, Make-A-Wish Foundation. They have 13 children in that program. So I said, in the Philippines, you fight for food. You see the difference there? So I thought of a nutritional campaign or a feeding program would be very appropriate for the Philippines. We have that, and we are very, very lucky and thankful because the American Humanist Association has donated a huge sum for our projects. Not only that, we have launched a few relief efforts. The Philippines is always visited by typhoons. That we're always in the news. Recently, we have what you call Hagupit relief effort in Ormoc, so the people in Cebu, that's another island. We're 7,000 plus islands in the Philippines. A few of my members in Cebu took a boat to go to Ormoc later. That's another island, and they did some relief operations there. The first relief operation, we almost didn't make it. You know why? They don't want us to put a tarp that says "Good without God." AHA is our biggest donor. We have to put their tarp. So what they did was to fold the part that says "Good without God," and we have a big tarp that says HAPI. HAPI, it's Humanist Alliance Philippines International. Everybody thought it was wrong spelling of happy, so it was okay. It was accepted, but they cannot accept the line that says "Good without God." But anyway, we did it well. They folded the just certain line, and it went well. And the second time, we went back to another small community. I think some of them are not very religious. small barangay in Ormoc, which was also affected by the typhoon, and the people gladly received, the goods without ado, without any questions. And the third one, we had a feeding program. We evaluated these people, and they said, whatever you have, we will accept, because they're very poor. If you can just feed them twice a month, it's like you're God to them. And they were very thankful that they found us, and they didn't care about what we are actually. I explained to them, they could not even understand what atheist or humanist is. You have to explain to them. They made me happy because they said, are you Illuminati? Illuminati, I don't even understand what Illuminati is. And they said, are you related with Miley Cyrus? I said, who is Miley Cyrus? I don't even know who is Miley Cyrus. They said, that actress, I think she doesn't believe in God. Are you like that? I said, well, maybe. Now they think we are associated with Miley Cyrus. I thought it helped us, because if they know who Miley Cyrus is, now they know, she's always saying that she believes in science and she believes more in herself, which is good, right? I think that's good. So I think we're really making a dent in the religious landscape in the Philippines, and I'm very happy, about that. And of course, the sect approval also is something that we can be proud of. So there are 3 societies in the Philippines that's really banging we're really doing the secular and pushing secularism in the Philippines. The Filipino Freethinkers, the Philippine Atheists and Agnostic Society, which I also founded in 2012, and now HAPI, Humanist Alliance Philippines International. So we are getting there. I just have a hard time grouping people in New York City. just like you guys. I think the reason is that people are too busy, and the stigma, the stigma of being irreligious is still there, even if you are in the USA. In New York City, I had like 4 or 5 members only.
Well, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
Uncle.
Yes. I would say, though, that it's not necessarily that there's a stigma of being irreligious that is always the hurdle, but in a place like New York, where we often don't have sort of in-your-face fundamentalism, sort of constantly around us, it's hard to really set up that that there's something that's oppositional. So people don't really care as much about expressing religious or irreligious beliefs. They just don't talk about it that often because the problems are much more subtle to some extent, although sometimes the problems are just ignored.
Well, my biggest hurdle is actually my husband. I want to be honest with you. I was invited by David Silverman to be a panelist in the AA convention. Was that in Utah?
In Utah, Salt Lake City, yes.
Utah, right?
Salt Lake City, yes.
Oh, Salt Lake, yes.
Utah.
Salt Lake, yeah. I was supposed to be there, but my husband said, if you go there, I'm going to divorce you. What you going to do?
Oh, no.
Oh, that's...
I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, he has threatened me with divorce 3 times already. I have to close the door. So that's my issue here, actually. And then I was invited to be a guest speaker of one of those Filipino talk show in New York City. They like me because I'm different, right? I'm the only different. And my husband said, if you go there, you're going to get killed. So I didn't go. That's my biggest hurdle here, is my husband. Oh, we like each other. We've been married for 19 years.
I was going to ask maybe if that's a way you could encourage participation in New York if you were to make known your humanitarian efforts in the Philippines, if perhaps Filipinos and other Asians would like to join into the humanist aspect of it, if not the atheist activist aspect of it. But then you were saying that maybe with Filipinos they have additional issues with being associated with humanism and atheism.
Well, I think you're really spot on there, because there is a journalist who contacted me. She is now promoting my society. She didn't promote the previous one because it said atheists. This one is humanist, and she's promoting it in her how do I call this blogs. You see, you're right. Because I even asked her, can you give me a free exposure of my new society? She said, of course. I could not believe she said, of course, because it says HAPI, it says humanist, and there is no, you know how people give meanings to words.
Yeah, that reminds me, here in Houston, I used to be one of the organizers of the Houston Atheist Group, as well as officer with Humanists of Houston, and I've always put the brochures and the business cards around town at different businesses, like anywhere that they have a section that you can leave those for other people. And every single time I would leave the atheist brochures, they would get thrown away by the next time I came back. Sometimes they would get thrown away while I was there. Somebody would throw them away while I was still at the restaurant. But the humanist flyers or brochures would always still be there, right next to them. So yeah, I think that's just, they just don't know what the word meant. They're just completely oblivious. Well, they're really oblivious to both words and what they mean, most likely. But certainly they just don't know what most likely what humanist means.
Okay, so those have been some of our successes with secularism and free thought. Now I want to talk about.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just this past year, CFI New York had a bit of a change in terms of how we are organized. We've become a all-volunteer board. So I've added a number of new people to the board. 2 of them are actually Asian women. I think when you're talking about representation, and I think this is also interesting because what Marissa was talking about with her husband, there's also obviously the sort of looking at this through intersectional lenses. So when we're talking about Asian representation, we also have to think about, how we represent amongst, different gender or sexuality, representations as well. So I think that was one of our major successes, and obviously I know most of you through the Secular Asian Community Facebook group and page. While that's been growing slowly, I think part of it is because I've been trying to maintain that sort of, just the intersectional view of how I come to organizing for the secular space. That, you can just have anybody join in, but I definitely want a community that's built on very specific kinds of values. So while we're talking about our successes, I don't want to just talk about raw numbers sometimes. I think we could have as many people join, but there is a toxicity even amongst the Asian communities about things like feminism or LGBT issues and things like that. So I think that's just something that I want to bring up as well.
We might touch on that a little bit later too when we talk about how we interact together. Now I want to talk about where we're missing opportunities to be welcoming to Asians, and like for example, Cindy Cooper was telling us in the Secular Asian community about someone that was making Asian jokes at a gathering, right, Cindy? Can you hear me?
Oh, it was... Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. It was actually the Facebook group, which I consider the Facebook group, the first step or introduction to a community, and it was for my local chapter, where I'm located, and someone had posted that they are a real estate agent and how to deal with Asians. She had that was Asian, and the question itself was bizarre because apparently we're all one big country as far as she's concerned. The cultural norms are all the same, but it's quickly turned into a joke about among many people, including the admins, about bringing puppies or cats as a appetizer.
Oh.
And when I did that, this is racist and very rude, I was given the normal tropes of, well, we're making fun of everyone. We're all equal. Or there was, I have Asian friends, and they would be okay with it. Or, I'm not racist, I have Asian friends. Yes. And so on, etc. And so it kind of puts a bad taste in your mouth when you go into these groups and, you're thinking about joining or going to an event, and you see that these kind of posts are allowed on there. And this was a very large post. There was over a couple hundred comments. And I think it ended with about 200 comments before it disappeared, or somewhere around there. Despite me arguing with people, after a while I gave up. But yeah, it's kind of a norm there where they think it's okay to make jokes about Asians, whereas if it was about any other race, they would notice that it would be horribly offensive.
I think that goes with us being cultivated as a model minority, as bearing our loads quietly and working hard. So people a lot of times don't acknowledge we're even there, I guess. But so it doesn't seem like it's being racist to joke about us.
Yeah, on that thought, yeah, that's something that I've noticed, felt that way for a long time, is that certainly there are certain ways that Asians can be joked about in a way that seems to be a lot more socially acceptable than other groups. And there's been for a long time, seems to be a big double standard there. You know, it's interesting that, you know, I don't know if this is, you know, the same is true kind of when it comes to the atheist community as well. You know, you'll hear a lot of things that are said, not jokes, but as far as just some of the incredibly horrible rhetoric you'll see from public figures about atheists that you would never hear them say about any other, certainly no ethnicities, but even other minority groups and even other ideologies. You know, you would never... well, or if you did hear those types of things, there would be a huge, massive social, you know, outrage, and there's obviously that huge double standard as well when it comes to condemnation, public condemnation, and discrimination against atheists.
Yeah, which is also why I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to interject real quick. Asians are the most bullied minorities in high school and grade school. Then go ahead, Michael.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to just piggyback on Vic's point. Like, that is why you would wish that the atheist community would be much more sensitive to that issue. Recently, even here in New York, there's a group I won't name that had a meeting basically to discuss why there aren't more minorities, and they just blanket minorities, race, gender, everything. They've gotten in trouble about this issue before, but again, this was hosted by, you know, a white guy. You know, they didn't talk to anybody that, you know, that they could have discussed this with before making that. And then I didn't go to the meeting itself because I pretty much did not feel like sitting through that again. And I've already heard that, you know, there was the same kinds of, you know, those questions like, we do what we can. We you know, we're not like racist, but we're not even just talking about being outright racist. Most of the people who are telling those jokes probably do not think that they are racist. Nobody ever does.
No.
They always, but what they're doing is that they're not taking an active stances to checking their own. Well, I got to use the word privilege. I know people hate that, but it is, again, a privilege for a large number of, especially in some of the older groups where the demographic tends to skew older too, and they're used to a certain way of doing things. And then when new people show up, that, you know, they're obviously affronted by having to change anything. I also feel that it's better to be hypersensitive about Asian racial issues these days, even if you may even think that you are probably yourself going overboard. But the reason why I say that is because we've sort of let it slide for so long that, you know, when the big stuff comes up, they kind of take our tacit approval of the little stuff as, why are you now objecting to this? And this has happened to me a couple of times where, you know, it's sort of like I let things go long enough, and then now all of a sudden, you know, larger jokes will come up, or, you know, much worse sort of assumptions about Asian ethnicities come up, and then they're even more confused because, you know, oh, you've been joking about us with this thing before, you know. So while I don't intend to say that make everybody's life miserable at all times because they made some innocuous remark, there is a value to calling people out, even for what look amounts to be a small thing. I would say that the same thing about, like, say, a certain Washington football team, or, you know, that it seems like, oh, it's no big deal, or like, I haven't seen the interview, so I'm not going to talk about it, but, you know, this was brought up before, that sometimes there are things in pop culture representation that are problematic, and I'm not saying, like, you know, to say that the movie may in its whole be terrible, but there are certain things you call out and say, hey, you know, this joke is just not acceptable to us and our community, and it shouldn't. And you should be able to see that, because if it was any other group, you would feel the same way.
I think to piggyback on that, I think if people are making a little more effort to be sensitive to making jokes about Asians and around Asians, imagine the effort we're making to laugh at your jokes, especially when they're not funny, or look like we're not offended. You know, like someone else in the group was saying that someone in their group was when they were taking a picture was making motions to, like, open your eyes bigger, and so in a freethought group,
Yeah, I think it is for us to really sensitize, to make them be a lot more aware. I mean, if we don't, I know it sounds like I'm calling for agitation, but unless we sort of speak up and sensitize them, people just ignore it. People who make snide racial remarks, I mean, they were absolutely not sensitized. That they thought, oh, they didn't think there's anything wrong, or this. It's like, oh, you're just hypersensitive to take offense. No, you're not sensitized to the fact that those are offensive things that you have said, right? And I think we really need to make concerted effort, just as in the atheist movement, when people make jokes about atheists, baby eaters, and so on. Yeah, no, we don't let them get away. I know they meant it's a joke, but we should not let them get away with it, and that's how we can start.
I think amongst the Asians that are really ostracized are Filipinos. They think that we are maids, we are servants, we are, have you heard of that, guys? That we are Filipinos are servants? And
I think that, I'm sorry. I think that goes to what I was saying about how diverse the word Asian really is in this country. When we're talking about, when we talk about model minority, what they're generally talking about, particularly among white America, is, three particular groups: Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. But when we're talking about other Southeastern Asian groups like Vietnam or Malaysia or the Philippines, and of course South Asia, which has a completely different aspect to it, with particularly depending on how closely the culture ties in with the Middle East in general. We realize that now there's also a huge income gap. There's an affluence gap. There are wide differences into the way our communities actually, in America particularly, are received. And but at the same time, because we have this sort of umbrella term of Asian American and Pacific Islander, I don't want to forget that, gets all tied together. We're not all, like Bill O'Reilly would have you believe, affluent, engineers and computer programmers who are now running Fortune 500 companies. So.
I believe 50% of, in the U.S., Asians have a college degree, but there is a very large aspect of refugee populations from Vietnam and places where the U.S. is policing, like Korea and Japan.
Mm-hmm.
That's my dog, sorry. Speaking of dogs and cats.
Oh.
I can joke about it, but
they can't joke about
it. Cannot joke about it.
Well, I think one thing that also needs to be done is it shouldn't just be up to us to speak out against these things. I know, whenever someone would post a body-shaming comment or meme on there, I would flat out say that this is highly rude and highly offensive to, that particular group or orientation or so on, etc. So more people need to be able to speak out and represent that these things are offensive.
Yeah, on that topic, I think, we've actually just recently here in Houston, Humanists of Houston, this was actually my #1 priority when I stepped in as president, actually, was that we develop a code of conduct where we actually have pretty clear guidelines of how we expect people to act and what kinds of behaviors are going to be prohibited. And that includes discriminatory comments, prejudice, racial, or really on the basis of virtually, not just ethnicity, but also, gender, body image, sexual orientation, nationality. I mean, we try to be very, very encompassing of all the different ways that people can be, prejudicial or, even inadvertently, expressing, bigoted sentiments. And of course, that was one aspect of the code of conduct, of course, that we drafted up. Of course, we also wanted to also be incorporate harassment issues as well in there as well. But I think that was something that was I wouldn't say it was a big issue certainly for us, our organization. It's not that we had a lot of these types of incidents. In my experience, we had a lot less of them than some of the other groups that I've had experiences with. And part of that is because we have we have an older demographic. I think maybe that has something to do with it. But anyway, point being that I think especially any organization, but especially with larger organizations, I think it's very important to have something, a code of conduct in place that makes it clear what kinds of behavior are not going to be accepted.
Yeah, we just took yours and basically from Houston Atheists and just put it into the Secular Asian Community Facebook group. So I mean, I just used yours.
You're referring to I think the Facebook the Facebook guidelines. Yes. Right, that's something. So what we also did here at Humanists of Houston was not just for Facebook, but really for everything.
We are very strict now with our guidelines. Otherwise, our Facebook group will become a hate group. Okay, we have to do that, or we will become a hate group. It's so difficult to manage over 5,000 people posting, some memes about this, about that. It's very difficult, believe me, and I have to ban a lot of people, and who cares if they hate me? I own the group, right? That's what I think my group. So it's
Marissa.
It's very difficult.
I'm sorry. I just want to. We had our own discussion about that on the outside before. I don't know how that went, but there was a particular issue that came up on your Facebook page. And it reminded me of just how difficult it is to police and moderate, these spaces. But it is something that just has to be done.
We have to ban them.
Well, we want to make sure that people, realize that, for everybody to feel inclusive as much as possible. Yes. That there has to be certain baseline rules. So.
Absolutely. I've been harassed so many times. I've been threatened so many times, but I don't care. I even tell them if something happens to that group, it's me. People call me out, not you guys, and I have to ban them. There are so many evil. I'm sorry to say that, but a-holes over there. Believe me, so many. There's one Filipino who is such an a-hole. He has been banned from all the groups now. He has been banned from all the groups. He cannot enter anymore because he just go over there and spoof. Just so you want to slap him back, and it's so difficult to have people like that, in your group. And then they come in again as dummy accounts. It's so difficult to. That's why I have a lot of admins, and of course, when they sleep, I'm on. And we are Filipinos. Some of them are so bad. They have not gotten out of their couch. They're what you call keyboard warriors. They don't care about you. They just do whatever they want to do. That we have to ban them.
Yeah, that reminds me of something that's kind of been an issue I've seen in the past with some groups. Is that they try to be very much about freedom of speech. That's a big value, especially with atheists. But it's especially important to many atheists who are extremely, just any infringement, anything that they perceive as infringement of freedom of speech. There are a lot of atheists
who religious.
have a problem with that. For good reason, it's very understandable. Yeah, it's very understandable why they would hold this ideal in such high regard, and in principle, that's a great thing. But we see that I've seen sometimes in the past where people take it to a little bit too much of an extreme, and sometimes you just have to set your foot down and say that, hey, free speech only goes so far. I was talking with a member, the organizer actually of one of the largest atheist communities in the country. Houston Atheists, by the way, is #1. Just to put that out there, we've got the largest meetup group in the world, actually, as far as the atheist meetup groups. So I was talking with one of the other organizers of one of the other in a different city, and she was actually telling me that one of their biggest problems at the moment, the biggest problem actually, is one member who is a white supremacist. And that he actually will espouse white supremacist ideas at their events, and that many people have left the group because of him, and that they've asked her to ban this guy, but their position, their particular organization, is that they are really about freedom of speech, and so they've allowed him to continue to be a member, and that's very unfortunate. But that sometimes I think that's just somewhere you just obviously have to draw a line.
I always tell them, you have freedom of speech, but you're not free from repercussions of that behavior. Whenever you say something, there's going to be a consequence. Sure, you can say it, but don't cry to me when you don't like the end result.
In the U.S., I think we have a lot of experiences with atheists being Christians censoring things in society. So we have a very instinct to push back against any kind of censorship and say, "Hey, free speech." But you got to understand what free speech is. Free speech is in public spaces. Private spaces, you're not, like in a bar, in a private space, you're not allowed to insult and offend anybody you want in the bar and expect not to get thrown out. So you got to understand the difference between your constitutional right and the rights that private organizations and businesses have to police their spaces.
And not only that, but also your right to call them on their bullshit. So. I mean, like there is an aspect, and this actually comes from the leaderships in a lot of our groups too, especially some very high-profile ones, that believe that getting called out on what they're on certain problematic things they've said is somehow like reverse oppressing them, or reverse racism, which doesn't exist. The idea that that by criticizing them, that they are the ones being silenced, while they're actually sitting in a position of the most power, and the most visibility and audibility, and yet somehow they have the gall to turn around and complain that they are being silenced for some of the terrible things that they say. Now, you can always argue that some people will have differences of opinions on how bad something may be that somebody may have said inadvertently or whatever. That's not the issue. It's the idea that while contributing themselves to sort of toxic atmosphere, to then turn around and complain about a toxic atmosphere is just is partly one of the reasons why I feel in the last year, while there have been some gains, like I feel like there's also just still a lot of running in place on a lot of these issues, that we're still we're treading over some of the same ground yet again, and it's really frustrating.
Yeah, and these aren't issues for progressive Christians. They are all about equality, and why we wrestle with equality in the atheist community, and we conflate it with free speech is beyond me, because we pride ourselves on our ability to think freely, but you won't think freely of your racial biases, or biases against gender or sexual orientation. If you're going to free think of it, all the biases, not just all cognitive bias. And one other thing I just wanted to bring up on this topic before we move on to another one is that a lot of times what we were saying earlier about Asians seeing other Asians there, maybe they've had experiences with other races saying racist things to them, and they feel a little more comfortable where they have somebody else they know that has experienced some of the same things. I mean, I'm biracial, and I come to the table whenever I go to some place with experiences of being discriminated against, and people not liking me because of my appearance. So that's something you got to bring it. If you want more diversity in the atheist community, or the free thought community or the secular community. You gotta remember that you don't. These people are coming to you with lived experiences that are different than yours, and you need to be a little sensitive to that.
I also think that organizations have to come at it not as we're acquiring diversity because we're supposed to, but because they want to. Like, the idea that that fear that people have about affirmative action being a quota system because they feel like they just have to reach a certain number and then they're going to be okay. I get that sense sometimes when I hear about these sort of diversity programs that are being put together by whether it's like any organization or corporation or group. That the way they approach it is like, well, we're just checking off the boxes here until we have the right number of brown people, in this particular, community. Whereas what you want them to do is no. You have to make that a priority. You want this because it's actually, better for you overall, for everybody in the group, not just to be insulated. So to do that, you have to think about it in a much more holistic sense than to think about it as, well, we'll put together a couple of programs and hopefully they'll show up, or we'll talk about it and maybe they'll like us, and then we'll get the numbers we need. If you're thinking about it as like we're getting the numbers we need, I don't really want to have any part of that. So.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next thing we were going to talk about here. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about where Asians get it wrong, where Asians have privilege. Well, particularly in the United States, a lot of Asians, I think there's like this, at least in my experience, you don't want to look at yourself as a victim. You don't want to take on the shame of a victim. You want to be seen as successful and a winner. So. And growing up too in my family gatherings, Asians do have some racist attitudes themselves. So how can we interact better with other ethnicities and gender orientations, and the question that Michael Nam brought up? Like. So if we're going to encourage more Asian participation, Asians do have issues too, and we don't we don't get along with some of the other minority communities like we should.
I can't say I have an answer to that. I don't know that that's a big question, big problem with I don't think any easy answers. But there was actually I was just reading actually about a psychological study which kind of explains at least in part the very distressing to me phenomenon where minority groups will be instead of being supportive of each other's plights and trying to help each other, will actually, in some cases, actively oppose each other or speak out against each other. Especially, when to me it seems that we should empathize and sympathize with fellow minority groups, because we do face very similar, even if not identical, challenges. Anyway, and of course, that doesn't happen a lot of the time in practice. And one of this study that I read about this experiment, what they essentially found was that minority groups, when they're confronted with the notion of their own discrimination against their group, it will make them less sympathetic towards other minority groups and actually kind of engage a tribalistic instinct, I think, is what it seems to me. And it's kind of counterintuitive, because you would think it would be, if anything, it would make you more aware of the discrimination that minority groups face, but it actually has the opposite effect. I don't know that that's something we can, use, as far as, other than, I guess, sometimes if it is very important to obviously speak out against injustices against your own group, but it's also obviously important to do the same with others as well.
Well, I've always approached it, particularly because, as Lilandra mentioned before, we're cast sort of in the model minority, like middle zone, and that's not an accident actually. Like that is purposely set up in terms of the way like immigration has worked in this country, to constantly pit one group against the other over time as each successive wave comes in, and when I'm thinking about like, let's say, particularly anti-blackness, which that obviously has been an issue coming up, unfortunately, in the past year with great frequency. A lot of times, Asian Americans have taken on the sort of that the same kind of tropes as white America in terms of fearing those the same stereotypes, because they're brought along to believe that we're sort of in a better level of, like, say, the great chain of being, the status symbol, the status in our country, that Asians are better than African Americans and so forth. So we're complicit in that, but at the same time, that same model hurts us, because now we're assuming that we're equal to, say, white America, but as we've noted, in terms of like our positions in the halls of power, it's very limited compared to our depending on the specific ethnic group, our achievements in academics, our achievements, our professional achievements. There's a certain, as they call it, a bamboo ceiling, which is an unfortunately named idea, but the bamboo ceiling, which prevents Asians from reaching a certain level of success. As long as we continue to uphold this model, which still holds blacks and Latinos and other groups down, I think this past year has really sort of brought a lot of that into clear focus, and how much that's actually hurt those particular communities, black communities specifically. And I think one of the things that's shown some promise to me was that more Asian Americans have sort of become cognizant of those issues, and I think I've seen more activists, particularly among millennial Asians, coming forth on behalf of those same protesters from Ferguson and onward, because they maybe this also has to do with the fact that the GOP hasn't done a very good job, conservatives haven't done a good job over a long period of time hammering home the message that we're exactly the same, because, I mean, they lost us by a large margin in the last presidential election. So I think there is much more awareness, but we have to be cognizant of that too. Even in the Facebook group, I've had to be aware of people who may have certain of these those same unfortunate beliefs about or just residual racism that nobody can really kick. So
Yeah.
I think
Go ahead, yeah. Oh, comment.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with especially the generational thing, because I noticed that the new immigrants, Asian immigrants, the new generation immigrants, Asian immigrants, those that are well off, who came here because of investment the investment because of business, they come from places, well-to-do countries like Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, right? And at their home in Hong Kong, Singapore, and so on, they have Filipino maids, they have Bangladeshi gardeners and so on. So they have that mindset already that there's some class distinction. So when they're here, they have not caught up with that concept of treating everybody equal. So they're still thinking that somehow Filipinos are beneath them and so on. That class distinction that they brought from home, which they have experienced. And added on to that, which is the worst scenario, is that their children are growing up in that sort of toxic home atmosphere. Yeah, however well they have done in school and so on, but they still hold on to that attitude. And I find it very infuriating when I was working in UC Berkeley, and when these are Chinese organization or freshmen who, I do some coaching in table tennis, and I hear them dissing, Filipinos and so on, and I just want to slap them and say, wake up, what the hell is wrong? They were New England. They came over when they were in grade school with their mom and dad, and they hear that in the home, right? And so, it's like we need to somehow get through to them, and I'm hoping that at least those two are university level would get a dose of reality and learn something. But yeah, there definitely is a problem, and I see them, and I just, oh man, when I see them in the freshman year talking like that, I just want to strangle them.
Yes, and I wanted to validate what Michael Nam was saying about the model minority thing in terms of Ferguson. I saw Bill O'Reilly saying when I think it was with Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart was like, "Well, they come from economic repression," and then he's like, "Well, what about Asians?" So they play one group against the other, but what Asians don't realize is we're still getting the short end of the stick because we have less promotions than our white counterparts. Even Asian males make less on average than white males. So if you get some benefit from it, like maybe the police aren't scared enough of us to beat us up or shoot us, but then think about what the trade-off is. You're being condescended to. You're being patronized. And I want you also to know that we will never look like white society. So maybe white Hispanics will be accepted before we are, as that class, as the ruling class. And there are in different states, they're passing abortion regulations that target Asians, like no sex selection abortion regulations. So they will still pick you out by what you look like, no matter how much you try to get along or play by their rules. So we have to speak up for ourselves.
Yeah, at the same time as for others, like it all ties together.
Okay, there's a question. The question is that panelists have mentioned that Asians are very religious, but what are the religions? Now Asian is a very large group, so that's a very complex question, right?
Yeah, there's a Pew organization breakdown that I think has it very clear, but I think we can give a general ballpark, all of us here.
In my experience, Vietnamese right now, because they were under Russian, they were an ally of Russia's. The country now is, people in Vietnam are very atheistic. It's one of the largest atheist countries in the world. China is the largest, of course, but and Japan is the second, I believe. Or no, there might be some Northern European nations that are ahead of Japan. But my point is, but when it was under French occupation, there was a large Catholic influence. So my family is Catholic, and maybe the people that are in the U.S. that come from Vietnam might be more Catholic because a lot of them were fleeing the North Vietnamese communists and maybe had worked with the French Catholic government. So there's that. And there is the ancestral element of Buddhism as well in Vietnam. And that's what my experience is.
Koreans that live in the United States tend to be, if they are religious, and by a large margin they are, tend to be of evangelical Protestant sects. A lot of times non-denominational, but various Methodist, Presbyterian churches as well. And I would say a subset is pretty Catholic, but nothing quite like Filipinos, right, Lilandra? right, Marissa?
That is correct. Yes, I think everyone here is Roman Catholic except me. Anyway, of course, that is our traditional religion. You are really forced to become a Roman Catholic at 3 to 6 months. How can you refuse that, right?
And the Pope was just there recently, saying things. Oh yeah, actually, could I just bring this up really quickly because of that? I just because of the Pope's visit, something that I really wish that more people brought up, whether in the secular or non-secular field, was when he made that awful comment about sort of bringing up birth control, contraception, and abortion as sort of Western imperial ideas being imposed on and that we shouldn't be imposing these rich countries.
Right. I like to ask him how come there's some archbishops.
Well, they forgot. Did they forget? They forgot that we got our Christianity, our Catholicism from Spain. We were colonized by Spain.
Right. I was so absolutely just mesmerized by the absolute hypocrisy of that statement. Is in that his entire where he's from himself is basically based on Catholic colonization of an indigenous population. So the utter gall of him to turn around and claim that other people are trying to impose their values was like, I just couldn't believe that people didn't catch that. It was historically awful.
This is the very reason why my group is diversified. That's why I have attracted a lot of white people, Europeans and of course Americans, because I want to introduce to the Filipinos that if they were colonized before, they have learned Catholicism, they can unlearn that through other people too. So I have a lot of staunch atheists in my group, who are very, very good with educating them. Of course, they fight once in a while, and I come in and and fix the thing. But really, this is what they need. This is what Filipinos need. The white people brought in Christianity, so the white people should remove that too, right? They will listen to a white person more than they will listen to somebody who's colored. You know that. They listen to me now because I'm in America. I'm an American. They listen to me. They look at me like their mother. They call me mommy. They listen. This is the reason why I'm successful, I guess, because I am an old lady. I'm not a young woman, So they see me as a very experienced person. And in the Philippines, when you have a little bit of money, it's power.
Right. I also just want to go back with the original question. I guess since we don't actually have any South Asians here, or obviously there are a lot of Muslims as well throughout the Asian world, whether it be India, Pakistan, the subcontinent, or like Indonesia and so forth. So.
We have them too, but very small. Right. In fact, I have been there. I've been to their islands too. They are very passive. They are not morbid and militant like the ISIS. They're very passive, but they're very poor. You can buy them. That's the reason why they're,
by the way, sorry, go ahead.
Cindy, your ancestry is Thai. What are the religions in Thailand? Are you there, Cindy? Oh, I think she's frozen. She looked like she was.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Most of the Thais are they're Buddhist, but the Buddhism is divided into two sects: the city and the jungle. And the Buddhist version of the Thai Buddhism is heavily influenced by the colonialism of British. I never really understood it until I actually sat around with some monks and asked questions, but they believe in a heaven and a hell, demons, angels, and so on, etc., just like any the Christian religions, but they still highly revere the teachings of Buddhism. So it's kind of interesting. There's also, different tribes that are in Thailand right now. I know my grandmother was saying that she goes to Thailand quite often, and that the Muslim population is increasing. However, they're trying to make sure that it doesn't become like some of the other Asian countries. I think it was the Philippines or wherever that it affects their government because they want to remain a mostly secular government. So it's kind of a hodgepodge in that country. Here in the U.S., most of the Thais are Buddhist.
Look, I guess she's frozen.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
So there's a mix depending on what colonial influences there are and what missionary influences there are, which brings us to our last topic, which is China is the largest atheist country in the world. It is 59% non-religious, but as in 10 years there will be 60. Right now there's 67 million Christians, but in 10 years there will be 160 million. And there's a study from Purdue, I believe somebody, his last name was Yang, that China's set to become the largest Christian country in the world, despite a very draconian enforcement of secularism in that country by the government. So why do you think this is? How can a country with 70 million atheists start to turn largely Christian?
Taboo?
Well,
It's a push. I think it's kind of like a pushback of you're wanting to rebel against the norm there. I can't personally imagine it, but I kind of think that might be possibly the mindset.
From what I've read, go ahead, Yaman.
I think it would be the same case as in Russia. I mean, Russia during the Soviet era was very, very atheistic, enforced atheism. And then as soon as the Soviet Union broke up, suddenly there is a vacuum, so-called spirituality, and the Russian Orthodox came in, and so did a lot of evangelicals. And you can see the Russian population getting more and more religious. Not only religious, but subscribe to every superstitious nonsense they can get their hands on. And we're seeing that. I am a lot more optimistic about China. I think in general Chinese are sort of more mercenary about religion, right? I mean, if it benefits them, they'll join probably. I mean, the famous joke about application from China to university, to a religious university from some Chinese student many before the communists took over, and under religion in those days the application had religion, and the applicant put down willing to be Methodist, right? It's like either talk to me and my cause. So I think that's what you're seeing, that not so much like unlike the Russians or the Koreans who subscribe whole hog to this. I think the Chinese are a little bit more mercenary about these things.
Well, you know, on top of what Yaman just said, you know, there's been some very interesting research too about when, you know, religiosity and superstition seems to be stoked when you have unpredictability in your life, and that's what we saw with the fall of the Soviet Union, with you know, under communist rule, strict communist rule. Yeah, it sucks horribly, but it's also very predictable day in, day out. There's not a lot of uncertainty about your future. What they found in a lot of studies is that, you know, when there is uncertainty, even if such as in a more capitalistic environment, it also makes people a lot more prone to superstitions and religion and turn towards religion, and that's obviously what we saw, you know, in Russia, and I think that's clearly also a big factor in China now that it's becoming so much more westernized and so much more capitalistic.
Right. They're still they officially allow other religions, but there's still a little repression of Christianity because they fear that it will take away their devotion to the state. So, like, they bulldozed a large Christian church in one of the towns. They said because it was too big it didn't have a building permit to be that big, and a lot of the churches are still in houses. And the official Chinese statement on this is that the numbers are inflated, but then other people say they're underinflated because you can't really count all of the house churches. And it's kind of a mixture of what Yao Man's saying and what Vic is saying. It is some pragmatism because Chinese business owners who are Christian, they have seminars I was reading on how you can be a moral businessman because you're a Christian. So they're conflating Christianity with morality, and it's some of the same things. And what you were saying about having the state force you to be an atheist, and now that you're not, so you didn't come to this conclusion through your own critical thinking. You were forced to believe that, and now that you're not forced anymore, you don't have the processes to come to these conclusions. And it's also, I think, what's happening in the Philippines, like Marissa was saying, that if people are hungry, they're going to go where people are giving them food, and there's an element of Christian charity, which I don't think well, there are secular charities, but I don't think humanists. Right.
We are the first ones, actually.
Yeah.
Right. I just want to also to jump in on that with China, and it's something that I think why FtBCon is called atheism with a conscience. It's this idea that even if you have something like the all-encompassing state like China, it doesn't really offer you much beyond just obedience, or that there's a particular set of very ascetic kinds of philosophical rules to follow. One of the things that we're struggling to discover for ourselves in the secular community is how do we make meaning, greater meaning in our groups to make it more worthwhile, to make it more friendly for people who there's an aspect of church that feeds that sort of need, the spiritual need, if they want to use that sort of kludgy word, but the government or capitalism are not exactly either in either direction. They're not exactly really heartwarming kinds of shall we say objectives to reach in one's life. And when as China's in such turmoil as it is with all the changes that are going on rapidly, and especially with continuing migration from a rural to an urban environment, you just have people who really need to latch onto something to give their lives meaning beyond just filling another quota for an Apple iPod. So I think you just feel like there's sort of an emptiness that these churches are trying to fill, and either the Chinese government or neither the Chinese government nor new capitalist endeavors can actually fill that sort of need.
I also wanted to throw this out here to the atheists who criticize social justice warriors. Some of the people in China are turning to the church because they believe that they can get social justice there because of some of the things that Jesus said about turning the other cheek and whatever you do for the least of my brethren, taking care of the poor, liberal issues. So the biggest church is Protestants. They're called the three self-churches because they're self-governed, they're self-propagated, they don't come from foreign missions, and they're self-sustaining. They're not sustained by foreign churches.
Right. That's not too different from African American church communities. That their only sort of hope for organizing and meeting their needs on not just a spiritual but an actual physical level of social justice comes from these places, and not just social justice, but as you said, basic caregiving, food, shelter, that kind of thing. So.
For it. And so people who think that we don't need it, that we'll just all be not religious, because the opposite is happening in places like Europe, where churches are going empty and being used for other purposes. And it's happening at a slower rate in America. But when that happens, what are you going to replace that with? So I don't think that you can stay secular unless you still have that community. for people to enjoy. So I don't think people should be disparaging our secular community or efforts to be to promote social justice. And so we're running out of time. So I'd like to give everybody a chance to give their final thoughts on Asians in the free thought community and encouraging diversity and talking about more than just black and white issues in the free thought community. I'll start the opposite way this time. Let's start with Yao Men.
Well, I would like to have my fellow atheists and humanists who are of Asian origins to speak up, to when they are in a group situation, they should really make a point of making themselves known, making their presence felt, and just let people know we're around, and that to not be shy and not hold back, and when you hear racist jokes and racist remarks, to speak up. And that's the only way we can sensitize the rest of the people to respect us and to understand that those days are gone when they can get away with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Yaman. Vic?
Yeah, well, I would again reiterate, to all the free thought group organizers out there, that don't be afraid to put on events to attract minorities. Provided that it's not something too overly stereotypical or anything. But I mean, it works. Me personally, hey, I've been talking with Yao Men about coming to give a talk to the atheist community here, the humanist community. I've been talking with Hemant Mehta about doing the same, who was invited to this panel but couldn't make it. Obviously, Lilandra, we've had you come and speak before. Hey, I would extend the same invitation to everybody else on this panel too. If y'all ever find yourselves in the Houston area or the Texas area, we'd love to have you come in and be our guest speaker.
Okay, that brings us to Michael.
I guess I would like to reiterate, a lot of what Yao Man said, is that we have to be better at speaking up about what we want out of our communities. And even there's just a few of us right now, that the only way to become more visible is to make ourselves more visible. So I think that there is an old-fashioned sort of reticence among Asian Americans and Asians in general not to stick out. It's often culturally important depending on where you're from specifically, but I would say that, yeah, we have to be vocal. We have to express our desires and our needs clearly and, without reservation, and not feel guilty about doing so. That's it.
Okay, Marissa's next.
Well, I think I am the biggest promoter of HAPI. I promote it to all groups. I have my own business cards. I have two business cards. One is for my real job, and one is for my advocacy. So wherever I go, wherever I go, I have my own tarp even. The big tarpaulin that you bring? I have that. So in fact, I just been to Orlando, Florida, and we have a mini meeting. I have 4 people. Who cares? There's 4 people. We have a tarp. We post it on Facebook. So we're growing internationally. Visibility is very important. Anywhere you go, if you have your card and say, hey, I'm from HAPI, I'm from the Philippines, well, I look Filipino anyway, and then just to give them a platform to come out. Now we have a lot of societies in the Philippines, and HAPI is the hottest right now because of the word. And we have to stick together as Asians, I guess. I know we look different. The Japanese, Koreans, and Chinese, they more look alike. They're white. The Filipinos were more of the brown and colored side. But we are all Asians. I think we need to stick together. It's just that a lot of people are very arrogant because they're free thinkers. But we cannot be arrogant. We have to be more tolerant about other people. I've been married 19 years to a Protestant. If I weren't tolerant, we would have divorced a long time ago, right? But because we are tolerant, we are humanists, we have to be tolerant. As long as they don't have bombs at their waistline, I will tolerate them, believe me. But if they start spewing hatred in my group, I'll be the first one to ban them. I'm unforgiving myself in that case.
Okay, thank you, Marissa. Cindy?
Let's see here. Well, I think that we need to make our presence more out there in the open. Like Lilandra had said, we should probably try and take a more leadership position and spread the awareness that there are many Asians out there that are atheists, and that it is important to represent ourselves.
Uh-oh, she's frozen again. Oh, I feel so bad about that. Okay, let's give her a minute and see if she can get unstuck. And my final word is that I want to encourage the free thought community to seek us out. We're here. It's not that hard. My husband has a podcast, the Ramen Podcast, and whenever we talk about an issue that is about race, like Ferguson, we don't just sit there and talk about it as non-black people. We invite black people to the table, and there are many people, black leaders, atheist leaders to choose from. It just takes you a little bit more of your time to find them. And not just Asians, of course, like Michael was saying, LGBT and women. Welcome us, and you'll see that you'll have a more diverse community.
Well, thank you all for joining this panel. Thank you all for your insight into your respective situations. I feel really bad that it cut off in the middle of Cindy's, and she's returned. So if you'd like to finish off what you were saying, Cindy, by all means.
Sorry, I actually kind of lost my train of thought.
Okay, well, if
other
you
than get active.
If you folks would like to join the chat room to discuss with some of the people who are there, who have been thoroughly engaged with this talk and were going into it for the most part, from what I can tell, without any real expectations, and were quite surprised with where it went and how it went, you can go to tinyurl.com/FtBCon, where we'll call this the after party, and you can check it out. In the meantime, we're signing off for the night. This is the last panel for the evening. Tomorrow morning we start programming at 10 a.m. Central with the true version of the false. Can atheists argue over the true version of religion? That's going to be a fun one. Thank you all for showing up, and I'm going to end the broadcast now.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.